I always thought my worst nightmares were figments of my imagination. Stories of ghosts, monstrous creatures, and serial killers were entertainment material, not reality. But that night, everything changed. That night, I discovered that true terror comes not from the unknown, but from the inescapable. It was 11 o'clock when I left work, much later than usual. The parking lot was deserted. The streetlights flickered dimly, as if the electricity itself was afraid to stay. My car was at the far end of the lot, far from the safety of the driveway. I hurried, hugging my jacket against the cold, feeling a shiver run down my back. The click of the car lock broke the silence, and I quickly climbed into the seat. As I closed the door, the outside world seemed to deaden, leaving me in a bubble of stillness. I inserted the key and turned, but the engine did not respond. I tried again and again until my trembling hand began to ache. Nothing. My car, my only means of escape, was dead. It was then that I saw it for the first time. A flash of movement in the rearview mirror. I turned my head, but there was nothing. A gust of wind kicked up leaves and papers, but no figure. I reached for my phone to call for help, but the screen showed no signal. Of course, as in any cliched horror story, I was completely incommunicado. A dry sound echoed through the car. My heart stopped for a second before realizing it was just a branch that had hit the window. I laughed nervously at my paranoia. However, the laughter froze in my throat when I saw a dark silhouette slowly advance toward my car from the gloom. It was a tall figure with a deliberate stride, and something about its bearing filled me with a visceral panic. Without thinking, I pulled the door handle to run out, but it stuck. The car was locked from the inside. I pushed all the buttons, pulled the handle, banged on the windows, but nothing worked. I was trapped. The figure kept coming closer, and now I could see its eyes, two glowing dots in the darkness. Its expression, if it could be called that, was a mixture of serenity and malevolence. I pounded on the window with all my might, screaming for help, but my voice was no more than a whisper in the vast emptiness of the parking lot. I tried to start the car again, begging for it to run, but the engine remained inert. The figure came to the side of my door and leaned toward the window. I could feel its gaze piercing me, examining me, enjoying my desperation. The figure raised a hand, and with a slow, meticulous motion, slid a finger along the glass. The sound was a low squeak, almost a whisper, but in the silence of the night, it echoed like thunder in my ears. It said nothing, just looked at me, and that silence was more terrifying than any words. Suddenly, the figure moved to the back of the car. My heart was pounding, adrenaline pushing me to move, to do something, anything to escape. Finally, I found a lever under the steering wheel and pulled it hard. The door unlocked and I flung it open, running into the darkness without looking back. My footsteps echoed on the asphalt, faster and faster, but the sound behind me remained constant, a methodical gait that did not diminish. I walked into the park that bordered the parking lot, hoping to lose it in the trees. But the forest, instead of offering me shelter, seemed to close in on me, every branch like a claw, every shadow like a hiding place for my pursuer. I stumbled and fell, tearing my hands and knees on the rough ground. I picked myself up, feeling the blood run through my fingers, but fear drove me on. I didn't know if I had managed to lose the figure, but the silence enveloped me again, so thick I could almost taste it. Then I heard it, a whisper, my name. I turned my head and there it was, a few feet away, the figure motionless, staring at me. His face, now visible in the dim moonlight, was a mask of inhuman serenity, with a smile that did not reach his empty eyes. In his hands he held something shiny, something sharp. I ran faster, feeling the cold air burn in my lungs, but no matter how much I ran, the forest seemed infinite, as if it stretched on forever, denying me a way out. My despair grew, fueled by the constant sound of his footsteps behind me, never hurried, always controlled. Finally, I saw a light in the distance, a way out, a promise of safety. I sped up, my legs burning with exertion, and emerged from the woods, only to find myself back in the parking lot, in front of my car. I screamed, a scream of horror and frustration, but the echo was my only response. The figure emerged from the woods, his shadow lengthening in the light. He walked toward me, slowly, savoring my despair. There was no one else, just him and me in this nightmare scenario. I backed up until I hit the car, no escape, no way out. My screams drowned in the night as the figure approached, his smile unperturbed, his presence a sentence. The last thing I saw were his eyes, two pools of darkness that swallowed me as everything faded into the eternal night of despair.